most people that know me now or have met me like this year probably don't even know my dad has passed away. So I just think that our ability or my ability to just show up to spaces despite like what I've been through is a superpower. I am able to have such a positive perspective on life and be who I am and believe in myself and have so much resilience and really move through the world a lot differently because I have faced loss several times head on. That's like my worst nightmare. That's the scariest thing to me. So if I can overcome my worst nightmare, then like the day to day is so easy. Like I don't live life in fear.
Dying of laughter.
It's not funny.
My mom has stage 4 cancer in her bones and in her breast. My dad's disease was 15 years, he died of ALS. I made a podcast about death, seemed like the thing to do. And if you're sad by all of this, well, you're gonna die too.
Happy week, all. Hope you're having an okay day. That sounds a little depressing, but you know what I mean. It might not be the best day of your life, but I hope today is perfectly fine. Perhaps you're having a delicious meal if you have access to that, or a little walk in nature if you're living in an area that is not on fire. I'm very much looking forward to sharing this episode with Chann daily. Chann runs the social media for Option B, which is a book and online community facing adversity, building resilience, and finding joy. We met at a Fatherless Father's Day event earlier this year on Father's Day, of course, put on by the Dinner Party and Option B. The Dinner Party, I've mentioned before, is an online community hosting free virtual grief groups for people in their 20s and 30s. I'm currently hosting a group about once a month. There's other groups that meet weekly, monthly, that meet based on the kind of loss you've experienced. Previously, the dinners were in person. They're now virtual. I think it actually opens opportunities for a lot more people to connect who live in different places, and it's really, really wonderful. Absolutely check out the Dinner Party and Option B online. So Chann and I, just by chance, were in the same group. I was really drawn to his perspective on grief, loss, and life, and I thought he just had so many wonderful things to say, and he had lost his father such a long time ago when he was a child, and yet he still had so many eloquent things to say about his perspective, and I just really felt appreciative of that. Since my own loss has been a while ago at this point, I didn't know if my experience was necessarily as valid in this Fatherless Father's Day grief group event we did on that day. And speaking with other people who had lost someone even longer of a time ago was really healing for me. And he just has so many nuggets of wisdom. And we were able to speak about grief, loss, racial disparity, racial inequality in this country. He opens up about losing his father and talks about growing up as a Black gay man in the South, and his perspective is extremely valuable. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to sharing it with all of you. If you like this episode and have questions about how you can get more involved with various grief groups, you can always DM me on Instagram at dyingoflaughter_podcast, or my comedy stuff is at _Chelswhoelse_. Please let me know what you liked best about this episode and what kind of guests you would like to see coming up in the future. Always like to hear from you, and keeping it a two-way conversation is important. So have a lovely day. And if it's not lovely, have a day. See you on the other side. Hey, Chann, thank you so much for being here virtually.
Hi, so nice to be here.
I really appreciate it. And I was so blown away by the way that you spoke about loss in this random group we were matched in online for Fatherless Father's Day.
Yeah, super random, but thank you so much. I definitely didn't know that, my words had any kind of impact, but I'm so happy that you asked me to be here.
Of course. I appreciate it, Chann. So I would love to jump in and share with listeners a little bit more about you and your story surrounding loss.
Yeah, so my name is Chann Little. I go by Chann Daily on the internet, and I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I grew up in Charlotte, but that's actually kind of a lie because I grew up on like the suburbs of Charlotte, a small town called Gastonia. And I had a very unique childhood because a lot of you don't know this, slash none of you know this, but my father, he passed away whenever I was 7. So I feel like that was just a big part of my story growing up. It's not something I talk about, so please forgive me if I stumble a few times, but it's still something that's like relatively something that I'm still working through as an adult, even though I lost him at a young age. So I'm just going to take you back to like my childhood. I had a really good childhood. Like my mom and my dad were in my life. I had the memories of my dad that any, 7-year-old have of their dad. Like I knew my dad as like the cool guy that bought a lava lamp for me and like would take me to walks to McDonald's and things of that sort. So I can't say that I had like this deep, like profound conversation with my dad or a relationship that was groundbreaking with my dad. Now that I look back at it, I knew him for what a child knew, like a parental figure back in the day. Fast forwarding to kind of like his death, I had to grieve my dad almost twice because my dad died as a result to gun violence. And that was something that, a young child probably couldn't understand at that time. So my parents, or my mom, she told me that, my dad died in a motorcycle accident. Like a few years later, she revealed to me that he actually was shot. So it was like almost grieving that 2 times over. And then here I am, a 7-year-old. I don't really, I don't really see a lot of examples of other kids like me. If anything, I'm keeping this like super quiet. I'm trying to deal with it privately because every other person had a mom and a dad, and it was super normal. And I felt like I had to keep up this appearance of being okay, even though I was going home to like a single Black mother in the South trying to find her way while also going through grief and also trying to like deal with all of the shit, that comes with raising a child after your partner dies. Growing up, I feel like I was always trying to make everything look as perfect as possible as a result of my grief, because I did not want any people to know the brokenness, quote unquote, of my home. I didn't want people to know that I had a mother that was going through depression and grief. And I was sometimes living with my aunt and my grandma as a result of that. Everybody else in my friendship groups, they had the perfect life, so I thought. So it was super hard for me to like tell people or let people in whenever I didn't want to let people in because of all the secrets I felt like I had, which was just a result of, I think, my dad's death. It's also another dynamic whenever, you are a young man trying to find your way without your dad going through your teenage years. Like I didn't have anybody to guide me through what I should wear on my first date or, how to do certain things that only I feel like men can teach you. So I feel like that was another thing that I had to face. But all to say, I do think that I view life as a journey. I feel like I try to find as much meaning in his death as I can, because I feel like it's going to sound kind of twisted, but like I've been also given like a lot of opportunities and everything as a result of that. And just to kind of let you guys know like what I mean by opportunities, so I don't want to sound like messed up, but there's just been like these like mentors and these people that have like really stepped up and showed up for me and my mom in a time where we needed it the most. And I almost like can't imagine my life without some of the people that kind of stepped up in that time. So I think that is something that I'm grateful for. I feel like I'm the type of person that tries to find silver linings in everything. And even though, I would want my dad here with me today, like if I could, I do find joy in the fact that there were a lot of people that like were there for me. And I feel like it did a lot for my own personal development. And I feel like it almost was the reason why my dad died is unknown, but I feel like it is a huge part of my identity. And I don't take like identity lightly. I really like who I am. I love my journey. I love my life right now. And that's just like a part of my story. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like if it was rewritten, but that's just not the cards that were handed to me.
I love that perspective right off the bat. So thank you for sharing this. And normally one of the first questions I ask people is, tell me about your goldfish moment. And the goldfish moment is the first time you thought about or conceptualized death in some way. For some people, it was their goldfish.
Goldfish moment. Did your goldfish die? Goldfish moment. Did it make you cry?
And I'm curious, as you were so young, do you recall this being the first time you thought about death? Was the loss of your dad? Or curious if something else comes to mind?
I am a little weird because like death doesn't scare me in a lot of different ways. I just find it like super fascinating. I feel like it hits different whenever it's someone of your own that passes away. It's kind of like that is the side of death I really don't like. It's like me losing someone that I love. Mm-hmm. But death as a concept, even for myself, it's just so interesting to me because I come from like a somewhat religious background. But I think that as I've grown up, I've become more open to just that's how it's represented in other cultures and things like that, and how just a lot of people perceive it. I think that one thing that unites a lot of people that are grieving in general is just like that love component. Like I feel like, you know, people really grieve because it's like unplaced love in a lot of different ways. So I feel like the first time that I feel like I had my fishbowl moment was, I think I saw someone die in like a movie or something. And then I remember like asking, oh, like what just happened to them? I was shook for less than better terms because I had just never seen someone die before, like obviously in real life, but on screen. And then my mom walked me through like what death was. And it was just so fascinating with me because this is like my mom from the South saying, oh yeah, the person died, went to heaven, X, Y, and Z, what you probably should say to a kid. But then I developed this fascination with just like wanting to like see people. This sounds so weird, but like after I saw it one time, I was just like, oh, I want to watch another movie where somebody dies because it's just fascinating to me. So I started to really love horror movies. And to this day, like I love horror movies. In every perspective, death is so weird because these people just think that they're going to have a normal weekend at a cabin in the middle of the woods, and then they end up dying. And I can't believe that people can die. Like that's just fascinating to me. But yeah, I'll stop talking like a serial killer now.
No, it's relatable. I mean, yeah. I find death fascinating clearly because here I am with this. Yeah. So yes, happy to be in your company of that. Okay. Yeah.
Really? I promise I'm not crazy.
No, I love it. And I think that's a good perspective, and being fascinated is another way of saying, you know, interested or impacted or affected. And there's different ways of looking at death. I mean, it is really fascinating. Like when you said, you're like, I just can't believe people can die. I mean, it's like as much as even I'm reminded about doing a podcast about it, I'm still like, whoa, this is not forever.
Especially when you think in terms of yourself, because like I've just always been alive. So in my head, so the fact that one day this is all going to come to an end and we just kind of don't know what's next, it's crazy to me. I'm not afraid of it. I'm just like more so curious about what that means.
Absolutely. So you had somewhat of a religious background, you mentioned. Curious, so does something come to mind as to what it might mean? There's not a right answer, but do you have a perspective on that?
That's such a hard thing to try to answer. That's like one of the things that I feel like everyone is trying to get answers to.
That's like the most loaded question I could have asked you, like right at the top of the interview.
Yeah, don't quote me on this. But I just feel like that to me means new life in a lot of different ways. I don't really define myself as like a very religious person, but I feel like I am a very spiritual person. And I feel like the spirit just is something that never dies. Not to sound like woo woo, but I feel like people's legacies and their spirit and the way that you like have impacted them, even if it's not on like a metaphysical level where, you know, we are these spirits floating in the air. I really feel like no one really dies as long as there's humanity, because there's always an influence. Like, for example, I have no clue that like our conversation in that grief group, like even left a print on anyone's lives. I was just kind of like speaking from the heart. And the fact that you asked me to be a part of your podcast today is like, just like a living example of how much influence we have, but we don't even necessarily know that we have influence. So whether you're talking to someone like at the market randomly, or you send an encouraging message to someone that, you know, had just lost someone, you have like an influence on everyone's lives, and that lives on like past you, because they can pass that message on, or the way that you made them feel on. So I feel like it's kind of like a cycle and influence that really is what we are made of. Like I'm the product of a lot of different people, and I believe that wholeheartedly.
I love that. So to paint a picture, an organization that I've mentioned on the podcast before called The Dinner Party, which hosts currently virtual grief groups for people in their 20s to 30s. Typically, the meetings were in person and now they're online, partnered with Option B, who you work for. And together, they held a Fatherless Father's Day. And it was just like a one-day thing. And I found myself signing up. You signed up. And it was interesting that we ended up here. I also found it interesting that a lot of people in our group had lost someone such a long time ago. And I was afraid that I was going to come and everyone's dad or mom or someone had just died. And a lot of people, it was so long ago. What do you think of that? I found it interesting.
I mean, I think that that's such a beautiful thing because I still don't have a lot of friends whose parents or one parent has died or anything like that. And if they do die, it's like super recently and it's really not a lot in between. So I found that very unique that we were all kind of like in that same position where we lost our parent or our dad, like, you know, so early on, for sure.
Since that meeting, I decided to volunteer to lead virtual grief groups because I just thought like that was really cool. And then people in my grief group too. Yeah, there's a lot of people where it's been a long time. And what that means to me is just that, you know, it's obvious that when someone so close to you dies, it's going to leave a lasting impact. And yet I think through a lot of the teen years, especially, it just becomes this thing like, I have to get over that and I can't talk about it. And it's just this weird thing. But once you reach like young adulthood and then adulthood, it's kind of like, actually, wait, no, that was a huge deal. I still think about that. So for you, I wonder how your grief has shifted over time through teens and early 20s for you.
Definitely has not been the traditional grief that I think that I see from a lot of people. I feel like I was young whenever my dad passed away. I reacted in a way that obviously like a child would, with like confusion. I was scared and I was sad. Like that's kind of like, it was very simple. That when I think about that time, it was so simple. I obviously was sad that my dad died, but it kind of ended there. I don't know what like other emotions came along with that. I kind of just grew up and I had to grow up like super fast, because I no longer had that, not to be patriarchal, but like man in the household, you know? So I had to kind of be that in a lot of different ways. Now I'm looking back on it. That's exactly what I was whenever I was younger. But I was just like, okay, I just have to get it together because I have like a family to try to take care of as a 15-year-old, you know? I think that as I grew older, I just realized like what that actually meant for me not to have a dad. Like I would not have someone to come to my high school graduation, move me into my college dorm. Like I am now I'm in an amazing relationship with this man now. And
Congrats.
I'm just like,
that's exciting.
Thank you.
Congrats is a weird thing to say. I don't know why I said congratulations. No, but that's exciting.
For being in love. I feel like love is something that should be celebrated and congratulated. So thank you. But yeah, we've been in a relationship for like a minute now and I'm thinking about marriage and I'm just like, my dad won't be at my wedding. Like, it's like this never ending thought in my head. I'm just like, oh, this situation, this day, it's going to be a little bit incomplete because I don't have this person that, you know, I barely know anymore. Like, I'm not going to lie and say that I had like the deepest relationship and I was so close with my dad and all that stuff, because I wasn't, you know, I was a child.
You can get Option B wherever you get your books. Option B is a book by Sheryl Sandberg. After the sudden death of her husband, Sheryl Sandberg felt certain that she and her children would never feel pure joy again. She was very much missing her father, preparing for a father-child activity. She was crying and was saying, I want Dave, I want Dave. And her friend replied, Option A is not available, and then promised her to help make the most of Option B. We all live in some form of Option B, and this book helps one makes the most of that. When you go to their website, they also have lots of resources. You can explore resources by category. It immediately, when you go to the site, The categories shown are grief and loss, health, illness and injury, abuse and sexual assault, divorce and family challenges, incarceration, raising resilient kids, and resilience. So there's something for everyone. And if you see an inspiring social post by option B, you know that it likely came from Chann.
I still grieve his loss often because I want him to be there for so many milestones in my life, and he just won't be. And for me, that's heartbreaking because, you know, you idolize this person whenever you were a child, especially after they die, because this person almost seems like larger than life. Like my dad, he was probably very similar to me. Like he was just a normal person that just so happened to die. But in my head, his legacy is like untouchable. So I think that that's one thing I'm currently just trying to work through in adulthood, is just like, what is a product of that death that's manifesting in your life right now? Like, what insecurities do you have as a result? Like, people say, quote unquote, daddy issues. Like, what daddy issues do I have? Because I lost my dad at such a young age. There's things that come up all the time, especially being in a relationship, that I have to like take a step back and be like, okay, this is not what it is. You're just projecting your experiences onto this person. So I think that right now, I'm just trying to figure out like, and also since I didn't have that example of a dad in my life and like that ideal man, X, Y, and Z, I'm trying to figure out who that is within myself and live that out every day.
Thank you for saying that. I'm like nodding my head to everything you're saying. I'm like, yes, yes, yes. And yes, like what part of the loss brings out what insecurities. And it is interesting how your past selves and childhood wounds do show up specifically in relationships and in other aspects of your life. And I feel like it's a journey for all of us to figure that out without, I'll speak for myself, without being a victim, like, oh, this is so sad, this happened. Like, that's not how I identify. But sometimes in therapy, you know, my therapist will be like, well, that did happen to you and it's okay to take ownership, but you don't want to be a victim to your circumstance. It's a weird balance.
It is such a weird balance because you don't want to be like, and this is something I never wanted to be like that depressed kid that's like talking about like their dad dying, because it's so heavy, because people will say like, oh, your mom is so cool. What about your dad? Like everybody just assumes that your dad is living. Right. And then my dad, like it just isn't. So it's so awkward. And it almost feels so heavy to come out to people like every single time they mention something. Because, I mean, I feel like I have to deal with this every single year or even month, because you meet a lot of new people just on a regular basis. So everybody doesn't have like that historic knowledge. And like, we shouldn't penalize them for thinking that somebody in your life that's supposed to be such a huge part is alive. So whenever I'm like having those conversations with people saying like, you know, yeah, my dad like actually was shot and killed when I was 7, like it becomes like dark and almost is like somebody shuts off the stage lights, and I have to like, I kind of use like humor to like get out of situations, or I like try to use my charm or X, Y, and Z. So I almost feel like I'm comforting other people whenever I come out to them and say that my dad is dead. Where I feel like it should be kind of like the opposite, but that's just the life I lead, I guess.
I've learned over time, people don't know what to say. It's like a flash in the pan, their eyes, when you say something, they're like, oh, and you're like, it's okay. So I
promise you I'm okay, like now.
So I'm curious if or when you mention gun violence specifically, what is that experience like for you? And what do you hope other people can learn from this conversation about the loss of gun violence?
This is very interesting because I feel like gun violence, gun control is super political, but never have I ever met anyone that has lost someone to gun violence that is like anti like gun control. You know, people get it, especially if you lose a family member randomly to gun violence. So I think that that's kind of like the most annoying thing that I have to go through now is like, I live that. Like, I know what it's like to lose a family member suddenly to gun violence because of gun control in this country. Like, that's just my identity. Like, that's something that I know back and forth because I lived it. And to just kind of like see people have opinions on something that they've never lived through and they aren't affected by, is super annoying. I can't lie. Like I kind of like have to take a step back from gun control in the news because it is kind of something that triggers me. And even like saying trigger is like something that is, I'm trying to work through. Like I have my words that I don't know, that I just can't even use. Sorry, I'm getting like a little frazzled because it like still frustrates me and makes me a little nervous to even talk about. But yeah, gun violence is something that I am obviously visibly still shaken up about because it is something that shouldn't be controversial. I think that we should have more safeguards to protect people in this country. I kind of wish they were in place so that my dad would be here right now, because at the end of the day, my dad would still be here if it wasn't for someone having access to a gun that killed him.
Thank you for sharing that and like for your honesty. And I don't have the right questions to ask, and I don't want to overstep asking you about that either. I also think if I didn't ask anything about that, then that's not acknowledging what happened. So do you feel it's appropriate for someone to ask how you feel about gun violence?
I think that it just has to be appropriate for the situation. Like if I'm telling you, whenever I like reveal to people that my dad has passed away, I don't lead with like gun violence, but it is often a question that I have to answer as like a follow-up. It's like, oh, like, I'm like, oh yeah, my dad, he passed away. And I'm just kind of like wanting to leave it at that. And then people are like, oh, but like, if you don't mind me asking, and I'm like, oh, I do mind you asking, but okay. Like how he died, because my dad, he died like I feel like a violent death. So it's just like, I don't want to like relive that at a cocktail party, you know? Yeah, I think that in moments like that, where we're like in a situation where it's going to bring up feelings for me, I would rather not have that conversation if I didn't prepare myself for it, because I feel like it's kind of just coming out of left field. But, you know, in a situation like this where I prepared myself for this conversation, or like with my close friends on a shitty day, I'm like, let me vent to you about this Facebook post that I saw from like someone that is pro-guns. And I think that that is kind of like where those conversations become more appropriate if it's natural. If it's forced, you really have to like ask yourself, how well do I know this person? What feelings is this going to bring up for them? And what are my intentions asking this person a question? Because if your intentions aren't good, then like why, or if your intentions are just to be nosy or X, Y, and Z, it's just like you probably shouldn't ask it.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that as well. I think it's helpful for someone listening to have that perspective. And yeah, I can't imagine that must be really frustrating, especially like you said at a cocktail party, even literally completely different situation. But my mom being in current treatment for cancer, people ask me stuff about it all the time, just like whenever they feel like asking, like, how's your mom? Are there more tumors or what's going on? And sometimes if I bring it up, then that's fair game. But if they're just out of the blue asking and not picking up on cues that I'm not going there right now, it's frustrating. So totally different situation, but it's frustrating when people don't pick up on social cues in general, I guess is where I'm getting at.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, what I said earlier about you know, he passed away, and like, oh, but how are you enjoying your cocktail? Like that is kind of like where I want to take it, because I do not want to go there, because I know the path that goes along. And I think more people should just realize that like asking those probing questions just really doesn't do anyone any favors at the end of the day. Because maybe you have a bit more information now, but like at what cost?
Absolutely. I like what you said about checking your intentions. Like, is the intention just because you want to know, or because it adds to that particular moment or something of that nature?
Right.
Oh, I feel like we could all write a book about the weird questions people ask about death, but let's not.
Literally.
Honestly.
I mean, honestly, that would be a bestseller in my opinion.
I'm like, let's not, but also actually let's. Like, here we are. Can you speak a little bit more about what you do at Option B and how you feel like that relates to your personal experiences, if applicable, or do you see it as a separate experience?
No, I definitely think the work that I am doing for Option B is very much in line with kind of my life story. And I feel like it's one of those things that is kind of a blessing in disguise. Like yes, I lost my dad at a young age, but I feel like now I understand grief in a way that allows me to, positively impact thousands of people on like a daily basis. So I feel like that is a cost of the circumstance that I feel like is a positive. Like I almost think about it as like a bank account. You're like either in debt or you are building your wealth. And I feel like that's one of those like wealth building experiences where like, yes, like there was a price that was paid, but I'm building my wealth through like so many like positive experiences on top of that. Yes, there's some debt. Yeah, there's like some bad stuff, but like option B is like one of those things that is, net positive in my bank account. And it is really cool to kind of see people in every stage of grief in living in one place. A virtual online community really dedicated to helping people really build resilience in a time in their life that they need the most. I think that that's super beautiful. I feel like I'm able to do my job because I felt grief head on in multiple times in my life. Unfortunately, like a lot of people in my life have passed. I still have a strong group of people that are here, and like mostly like all of my mom, my sister, all those people are still alive, thank God. But I have lost a lot. So I know what grief feels like. I know how confusing it can be. I know how it's kind of something you never get over. It's something that you learn to live with. It is an important part of everyone's story. And I feel like people don't talk about it. A big part of what we do at Option B is kicking the elephant out of the room and destigmatizing conversations around grief. It's something that every single person is going to face in life. So we have to start talking about it in order for people to be able to like move through their grief and really like develop healthy coping mechanisms to be able to like come outside of it. There's like this book concept that we talk about at Option B called post-traumatic growth. Is like, how can you grow from this situation? Life is obviously like handed you a bag of shit, and like option B is like, you could still find joy in your second option. So I think that that's kind of like why I am so passionate about my current career field and like why I chose to even do this job in the first place. It's because I really believed in the mission.
I love that. And I love that. So option B's mission talks about building resilience in the face of adversity. Could you share for people that don't know a few of the main pillars that option B is currently working on and like how you play into that specifically, just to share a bigger picture for someone that doesn't know what it is?
Yeah. So option B was written by Sheryl Sandberg, who is my boss, but is also the COO of Facebook. Whenever she lost her husband, Dave Goldberg, and suddenly she was faced with obviously grief. And she partnered with psychologist Adam Grant to write this book, really like telling the stories of a lot of different people that have faced different types of grief, and also give people the tools to be able to effectively cope with their grief as it comes. So there's a lot of things in the book that like teaches you how to practice gratitude and mindfulness, and also like different studies taken on by like really prestigious universities that talk about grief and study human behavior. And I think that it's really like a great combination of a lot of different resources for anybody that is, 2 days into grief or 25 years into grief. Like it really like hits on a lot of great key lessons.
So they're working on that. And then are they trying to develop another book? Or I'm curious how they're taking the mission further one step at a time, because it's also interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think that we're just trying to bring the book onto social and web in a way that kind of lives on past like the physical book. So we're just trying to make sure that we're breaking down the book into like lessons that are applicable to people's lives and kind of like every season, so that people can come back to certain lessons and be like, okay, well, this is going to help me in this certain situation at this point. So just really, equipping people with that, grief toolkit to be able to, we say like kick the shit out of their option B. And I think that that's like the most amazing thing.
I love it. I love it. Well, that's really cool that they have the insight to keep the book living in new ways, in creative ways, in online ways, in ways that can reach different types of people all over, instead of just being like, I have a book, now what? Like, they really have their stuff together in terms of getting it out there. And that's great. They partnered with the dinner party, and it sounds like you guys are partnering with all kinds of cool organizations to do different things.
Yeah, we are. It's been an exciting year that I've been in the organization. Can't wait to see where we go next.
I love it. Is there one particular project that sticks out that you've worked on so far in the past year, or one particularly meaningful moment that sticks out for any reason?
I think that I joined the organization during the holidays, and the holidays are coming up again. One of our biggest initiatives is Option Be There for the Holidays, which really helps people through a time that's supposed to be happy and supposed to be joyous and supposed to be like family oriented and all these things. But for anyone who has like lost someone that's super close to them, they know that the holidays can be super painful. So yeah, I'm really, really proud of that initiative. And I feel like that's something that's going to go on for forever. We don't talk about it enough, especially in the media. You see like on Instagram, all your friends are dressed up as like cute reindeers and like with their full families. And you look at that and I'm just like, wow, I won't experience my holidays like this year or ever. So it gets kind of heavy. So giving people that like community of like, oh, I'm in the same situation. You are less alone. Yes, this sucks, but at least we're in it together. I think is super cool.
That's such a good point, especially this year. I mean, what people are going to be facing during the holidays is quite profound for so many reasons. So I'm glad that this book can reach people in general and specifically in 2020. Gosh, I wonder where we'll even be at that point. It'll be post-election at that point. So
I just literally have to take it day by day. Like, yeah. I don't need to have an anxiety attack thinking about where we're going to be post-election.
I'm sorry. You're like, let's actually not.
You know, you're right. Let's really take it day by day. I think that's really the most important thing to do this year specifically, or else it's overwhelming.
And one of these things, I don't know if you do this at all, but it's like every day, I say take it day by day because every day to me is just like so full of meaning, and like I just try to really tackle my days one by one. Mm-hmm. And then I end the day and I'm just like, oh, thank God, like nobody died. Like we are good. Another day where like I have my closest family members and friends living. That's kind of like things I think that people with grief kind of face, because there's always that, what if my mom dies, or what if like my sister dies? Like anybody can die. Now my like dad died. So I think that every day where like somebody doesn't die is like amazing, you know? And I really take it as that.
You have a fantastic mindset about life. Do you know that? I mean, you just like are very positive and helpful. Like even just talking to you now, like you have a very powerful mindset.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. It's just the way that I think. Like I try to have a positive mindset because, you know, I feel like this is such a hard world, and, you know, I face a lot of different things just because of some of my identities. Like I'm a Black gay man that lives in the South. Like life is not easy, but I still can find joy because I'm healthy. You know, I have a supportive group of people that love me, and I'm okay. Like I have a roof over my head. Like I really count all those blessings because I really feel like there are people that don't have a lot of the things that we have, especially living in the United States. Like it's a lot to be grateful for. And I think that everyone kind of has that thing. Even if you're like the poorest of the poor, you probably have someone that you wouldn't trade for the world. So I think that that's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. What do you wish people knew about your experience, specifically grieving as a Black gay man from the South?
I think the way that my life is, I have so much empathy for just humanity, because I think that at the end of the day, we all have our identities that we're trying to work through at the end of the day, whether they're visible or not. Everyone has things that are holding them backs. I'm not saying that any of my identities are like holding me back, but they're definitely like roadblocks in certain different ways. So I think it just gives me a lot more empathy, and I feel like people should just lead with more empathy, not knowing what people's identities are like, what they've been through. Because of my identities, I've been through a lot, and I feel like I deserve to be happy, and I feel like everybody deserves to be happy because everybody has probably been through a lot. Like going through a lot in this world is just kind of like inevitable. It's kind of like something that you sign up for whenever you are entering the world. Like, you know that you're going to go through a lot, but you can also go through a lot of joy. You can also have a lot of love. Like I feel like I try to counterbalance it. So I think my biggest takeaway is just like, don't judge the books by the covers, and like really assume positive intent, because you don't really know what people have gone through that made them the product of whatever they're doing right now, or however they're acting, or X, Y, and Z.
Very well said. And it is unfathomable to me how anyone could walk through the world with a mindset that was anything other than that. Like to think it's acceptable to have any preconceived notions or judgments about someone because of an identity that they can see or not see is absolutely unfathomable to me. But I appreciate you articulating that, and I hope it can resonate. And, I think denying that those points of view are real is not acceptable. So as uncomfortable it is to acknowledge there are people with all kinds of issues and preconceived notions. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. And I hope that if anyone listening that is, fuck people listening if you disagree. Was that helpful? No. But I'm just like, I just appreciate your perspective too, and just always being positive, like ending everything that you're saying with a positive note is not something that is natural to everyone. And whether or not it's natural to who you always were, it's just like, it's literally even so helpful for me to talk to you right now. I'm like, wow, great perspective. You are positive. I really admire that about you. I've said that again, but I'm just going to keep saying it. So you're awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
What has been one particularly challenging moment about your grief, or what has been one particularly inspiring moment about your grief?
Yeah, I'll go there in like the inspiring route, because I feel like
hell yeah.
But I feel like you really don't know how strong you are until you lose someone that's like, that you just like can't imagine your life without. And you wake up the next day, or like you wake up a few years later, and you're just like, wow, like I'm still alive. Like I am still alive. I have X, Y, and Z going for me in spite of like this really shitty circumstance. I am not somebody that like, again, like this is not something I like to talk about like on a regular basis. Most people that know me now or have met me like this year probably don't even know my dad has passed away. And like, it'll randomly slip out where like, for example, even at work, some people didn't know that my father had passed away. And like, we do grieve because I just kind of like move in a way that's silent. So I just think that our ability or my ability to just show up to spaces despite like what I've been through is a superpower. And I think it makes me a lot stronger than the average Joe, I would like to say. I think that I am able to have such a positive perspective on life and like be who I am and believe in myself and have so much resilience and like really move through the world a lot differently because I have faced loss several times head on. That's like my worst nightmare. That's the scariest thing to me. So if like I can overcome my worst nightmare, then like the day-to-day is so easy. Like I don't live life in fear. So I think that that's one of the greatest things that has developed out of my grief is that I kind of take it day by day and I move through the world with power and fearlessly because you don't know like when your last day is, not to sound morbid. And I'm not trying to like waste my day not knowing if tomorrow is going to be here.
It's so true. It's like, how would we show up in the world if we knew the last day of our journey? Right? I mean, that would be so interesting.
That would say a lot about you. Either way, I mean, I feel like that's amazing, but like how you spend your last day on this earth says just a lot.
And you did address, you know, when people ask you about the loss of your dad, sometimes using humor. I do that as well. Just as it is the Dying of Laughter podcast, is there a particularly comedic or strange or awkward moment that you can think of surrounding your grief journey that comes to mind? And that's also okay if not. But I think sometimes like in grief, we're asked about like the heaviest thing, like what's the hardest thing you went through? And sometimes I like to know like what's something kind of funny or weird that you went through?
Yeah. Again, this is like one of those things that's going to sound kind of like messed up, but I kind of have like, I'm Capricorn. Capricorns have dark humor sometimes. That's just, I feel like a part of our personality trait. So I like to, strangely enough, make like dad jokes sometimes, just like in kind of like inappropriate settings. Like for example, the other night, my friend Jasmine, me and her are super close. She loves to talk about her dad, and I don't even think she like knows how much she talks about her dad. But me, I'm kind of like, I'm like nice and all that stuff, but I can be kind of like a smart ass with my friends. Yeah, she's like saying something about her dad, and I was just like, we get it. You have a dad. Like, and the room went silent, and then we all just like started laughing because we're like, dang, you really have been talking about your dad for like 3 hours at this point. So it's like moments like that where I'm able to just like have fun with life and be like, okay, yeah, I don't have a dad, but like we can laugh about that sometimes. Like it doesn't always have to be like this big, heavy, depressing thing. Like I want people to kind of know, like if I can laugh about it, if I can like kind of, you know, I'm one of those people that believes like that laughing at yourself to kind of just like get through life and cope. Is it healthy? You know, TBD. I'll talk to my therapist about it. But as of right now, it's worked for me for this song. Like, I just think that is a beautiful thing to be like, yes, this sucks, but I'm going to still smile and find joy and crack a joke about it, even to bring comfort to myself and to others in just like a hard time.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's interesting. You say you're like, is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? I think it's super healthy, you know, to agree, as long as you're not all day, every day cracking up about like how depressed you are. That's another story. But I think the occasional dead dad joke, I mean, I am here for it. I am ready for it. So
I mean, honestly, it has been a crowd pleaser, ironically. Like, I'll say something and my friends are just like, why did you say that? But they will be like on the floor laughing. And for me, that brings me a lot more joy than just like being sad about it, you know?
And I think that is one of the gifts of time. You know, the farther the loss is away, it can feel like sometimes I feel like I lost the loss. I'm just like, or I'm mourning the loss itself, because when the loss is close to you, then you have all these memories and feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Preaching to the choir.
As it gets farther away, you know, that's its own loss. However, there's the gift of having perspective, and humor can come with that. Whereas someone's dad who died 2 weeks ago, cracking a joke is now uncomfortable. And I even say that as a comedian, like I can take a hard joke, but it's just, you know what, it's too recent. And it's like, it's just, you know, that they have the intention of bringing relief, which is important, but there's something funny about the timing. You know, if it's been a while, you can joke. I don't know why that is. It just is.
Yeah, it just is. It's kind of like you have to read the room. You have to kind of know the circumstances. I do this in like spaces of comfort with like my closest friends, and like we get it. Like we know that like I'm not this heartless person that's joking about the death of my dad. Like it's just like a part of my personality at this point. So I think that, yeah, like you're saying, if it was like something that was super recent or something that I'm still not over or whatever, it would be a different situation. It probably would be something I'll handle with more like delicacy. But at this point, like I've lived more life, you know, without my dad than with my dad. And I've like grown into a person that I really like and I'm confident in. And like, I'm generally like a happy person. Like I love my life right now. So I feel like I'm able to look back at those moments and be like, okay, well, this can be looked at as like a way that I've grown through a really hard obstacle and just came out on the other side stronger, more knowledgeable. And I feel like that should be celebrated and laughed at. And like, there's just been so many emotions that's associated with that it's okay to like really feel whatever emotions you feel, whether that is cracking a joke or whether that is like crying because my dad won't go to my wedding in like a year. Like it's okay. Like you can feel both.
You can feel both. You can feel it all. Okay, it's not that you cannot feel like a songwriter, but you can feel like other things.
I would buy the track.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Okay, one customer. Great. How has racial injustice and social injustice of 2020 impacted your grief story and point of view on loss?
It is something that I'm currently working through. I think that one, we talked about kind of like the dynamic between gun violence and how Black men are just kind of like senselessly or like there's senseless killings of Black men in our society that comes as a result of like police brutality and a lot more other circumstances. I think that plays into my grief a lot because my dad died as a result of gun violence, not at the hands of police brutality, but hearing conversations around like a Black man shot like innocently just brings up those feelings of grief over and over again, because it's almost like you can feel the pain of that family because you have been there. You get it. You know how much like these tools that are meant to protect us can also hurt us as well. So it just almost hits different. And being a Black man and having to face the world without my father as like an example, I kind of don't know how to always navigate certain situations. Like there have been times where I feel like it would have been really nice to get my dad's advice about how to like really show up in the world, even though the world is a better place than it used to be back in the day, debatably. You know, Black people still face a lot of like racial injustice. Like me being the professional that I am, I live in like a relatively nice, like white neighborhood. I have to worry about people looking at me weird when I'm going for my morning jogs. Like sometimes I've been asked if I'm like stealing things from stores just because of my identity. And I think that people default, this is how a lot of Black people just think, like you default think that people view you in a certain type of way because they have viewed you in so many different ways for your whole entire life. So seeing racial injustice happen right in front of our eyes and see so many like Black people innocently get killed is something that is constantly triggering. It's almost like grieving all over again. All those feelings come back every single time you see a George Floyd or a Ahmaud Arbery or like a Breonna Taylor. You grieve those people as if like they are your family. And I just kind of want people to know that this is something that actually affects the Black community. Like I actually have to get in my car every single day and hope that I don't get pulled over and it escalates. So I think that just like, yeah, I mean, it's something that I'm working through right now. I don't want to get like super emotional on the call, but the emotions are real and they're there because there's real fear and real anxiety around just like living life whenever there's so much uncertainty happening, not only with like COVID, but also like racial injustice in 2020. Like, can we just get over it? Like we shouldn't have to deal with this in 2020. I feel like I should just be living my best life like I plan to do. But you know, there's always like some system or something that's set up against you whenever you identify as like a person of color.
Thank you for saying that. It's so unacceptable. There are not words that we are still here in 2020. And I appreciate you saying that. That's what I'm not going to come and say that I don't want to follow up to that. Like this is your stage. And I just think I appreciate you saying that. And it makes me so mad. It really pisses me the fuck off that someone accusing you of stealing something from a store that's unimaginable and that's unacceptable. Like fuck those people, man. Fuck them. Fuck.
Honestly, a lot of people judge, and I think that that's the saddest thing in the world because we're more similar than we are different. Like, you know, we've had this conversation for the most part, and we've had more similarities, like not even really knowing each other, than we have like differences. And I feel like if we really took the time to like put our identities aside to get to know people for who they are and their stories, the world would be a better place.
Absolutely. You're so correct. And, you know, listening is just one very, very, very small piece of it. But I'm grateful to podcasts randomly. I mean, I just feel like I've learned a lot from podcasts, even that I like that there's free information that's accessible if you open your damn eyes to it. Now, how do we get the rest of the people to open their eyes to it? That's another story.
The pandemic really helped because I saw some people holding up Black Lives Matter signs that I've just never seen before. And I really appreciate that. I feel like the world was kind of like at a point where everybody had to listen to what's going on. And at this point, if you're denying racism or if you're denying the systems that are set up against people that look like me, that's kind of like your own problem at this point. Like, I can't, I'm not trying to convince anyone. You believe what you want to believe. I come to you with love and respect. Hopefully you respect my existence as well.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. That's so helpful and appreciated. And, it's not your place to have to keep repeating yourself with stories like that. And I hope that you don't have to. And yet I just respect and appreciate you sharing it now. So thank you. And on that note, is there a resource, film, book, or podcast that you've found particularly inspiring to your own journey surrounding grief or injustice, their intersection, or separate entities? Something that's inspired you?
A ton of resources. I'm a resource guy. I feel like for grief and the tools to help you navigate that, obviously option B, this is not a sponsored ad, but we do incredible work for people that are going through it in that way. In terms of book, there's this really great book by David Kessler called Finding Meaning. He is the person that kind of came up with that initial 5-stage of grief type thing. And knowing him personally now, there are no stages of grief. And he wanted to make that very clear. It's not linear, but people have certain trends that fall into one of the stages at different times throughout your whole life. So 5 stages of grief is kind of a loaded term, but we like to say that grief is just a lifelong journey. And you might fall into one stage in different points of your life, but it's ever going and ever growing. So that's another resource. In terms of mental health, NAMI obviously is the go-to for mental health resources in your local community for people of color. There are a lot of resources for BIPOC communities that are facing stigma when it comes to mental health that are definitely worth checking out. It's almost as easy as a Google search these days, but I'm so glad that people are talking about it. So those are just a few that have been helpful for me personally. I love to also follow people that have also lost their dads. And I found those people by going through the hashtag rest in peace dad on Instagram. You have to really find your community of people that have been through similar experiences and have advice on how they're coping with it. Because not saying that all these people are experts, but something that they're doing might help you. So I always love to follow people in the grief space because they offer great insight on how to cope with grief and mental health and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, they can follow option B as well. You guys post really valuable stuff, and you're the one posting some of it, right?
I'm the social media manager. So everything you see on there is a product of, the team. And I think that we really hit the mark on a lot of great things.
I love that. Okay. Because you were so young when you lost your dad, I'm curious what advice you might have for other adults who encounter kids and preteens, younger adults who have lost someone. You had mentioned mentoring. Was there someone in your life that really impacted you at that age? And how can adults volunteer and mentor or give back in some way to kids of your age who lost someone?
Yeah, I think that in terms of ways that you should show up for children that have faced grief or facing grief currently, I think that obviously there's more challenges because of COVID, which really interferes with that in-person time. But I really think that finding actionable ways to help the parents of the kids super helpful, because I think that one thing that people forget about is either one or the other. It's oh, I'm going to support the mom, but I'm just not going to worry about the kid, or I'm going to focus on the kid. And the parent doesn't have support. So I think that really keeping in mind that both people have lost someone or whatever the situation is. Like someone has lost someone, you should take care of the people that are affected by that loss in whatever way you can. Like, and for some ways, it's like, I'm going to drop off, take out food for you and your kids, or I'm going to get you a gift card, or maybe I'm going to get you plasticware so you don't have to worry about doing dishes for a while. It's like, you can show up in material ways. You can show up for just calling, say, hey, like, I know you may not even want to talk to me right now, but like, if you ever need anything, I am here and I will sit with you, while you're grieving. I think that that's super beneficial, and just like acknowledging and honoring the person that they lost. Because it's one thing to probe and like ask personal questions about, oh, how the person died, X, Y, and Z. But like, if you were saying, hey, I know it's been a while since I checked in on you. How are you dealing with like the death of your X, Y, and Z? I feel like I would 100% answer that question with like so much gratitude that someone actually asked, because, a few weeks past the funeral, people really fall off. The flowers stop, the cards stop, and then you're just really left to face that grief on your own. So somebody that reaches out about my grief, even like years later, I feel very seen by those situations. And it's almost like you said a little bit earlier, like you gave me the stage to talk about something. It's like, I feel like somebody's actively giving me the stage to like talk about how I'm doing right now, because I don't have those check-ins as much as I should. So just like asking people like how they're doing and almost keeping it general enough. And one thing that you should never do is like ask people how they're doing, but like ask people how they're doing in like that very moment, in that very second, because everybody that's grieving knows that like it's a real journey. Like I might feel great today, but feel like shit tomorrow. And I think that asking people how they're doing in the current moment kind of helps ground them as well. So there's just like a few things that I suggest, like helping people, children, with like just really making them feel like they matter, they're seen, and that you're going to be there for the long run. Like you're not going to be one of those people that like sends a card and forgets about them. You're going to be one of those people that like checks in on them 2 years later and like honors their dad on like their death anniversary and like makes it a thing. Like you're going to be one of those people that like shows up consistently for the rest of your relationship. I think that that's kind of like the best advice I can give.
Yes, that is so important. And it's so true that, the first like year, 2 years, like everyone asks, and then it's like, oh, guess it's over. Guess we're good. And you're like, oh, actually,
that is not dead anymore.
Yeah. And hey, there's no shame in using a Google Cal reminder. I myself am, we're all on a journey. I myself am trying to be better about checking in with everyone I know who has a loss now. And so I was like, I'm not going to remember all these dates. I literally have in my Google Cal, like, Brooke's brother died. Like, that's what it says. Shout out to Brooke. Hey, boo. I always text you on the day your brother died, but it's in my Cal or I wouldn't know.
Literally, that is genius. I feel like I'm going to do that, not hoping that a lot more people don't die. I'm still going to keep that practice in mind, because I mean, that is inevitable. So you are going to have to address it eventually living this life. You're going to have to be there for someone, and you want to show up in the right way, because as much as I remember like all the good, I also remember people that have like probed a little too hard or, not showing up in certain situations, which I feel like you kind of can't come back from in a lot of different situations. So you don't want to be that girl, guy, them that like does that,
Yes, you're correct. And I feel like if someone's listening to this, they're getting one step closer to like staying curious and open to how they can, learn more and not be afraid to reach out. I think some people who haven't experienced it are afraid to ask how someone's doing years later. So hopefully like your advice gives them permission to send an email or text even so many years later, because it's so important and appreciated.
Yeah, do it. It's not awkward. You're not gonna like I know my dad died. Like, you're not gonna remind me of anything. Like
he did. What if you responded was just like, wait, what? He died?
I forgot. Why did you try to check up on me? Like, what? But it's fine. Like, just do it. It might be awkward for you, but for the person, it's probably going to be like so like relieving that somebody actually is checking up on you. Because I mean, I don't know about you, but like in my normal day to day, like I just don't think that people think about me. Like I'm just kind of in my own head. But like the fact that like people will reach out to me like, hey, just checking in, like that makes me feel important.
Yeah, we all have the assumption that everyone we know is dealing with their stuff in some like magically secretive, productive way. Like, you know, I'm like, oh, my friends have all these like secret, a million fairy therapists helping with them with their trauma. It's like, no, like we are each other's support system. As much as professional mental health is so important and encouraged, and I do it, it's like no, like we can be here for each other as peers and like friends and all that stuff. So
yeah, my friends are like my therapists as well. Like I have my therapist, but like some of my friends I probably should be paying to listen to my problems.
For sure. Shout out to friends, man. You know, they're there through it all. Is there any last questions that you wish you would have been asked?
One thing that I wish more people would kind of realize is that death, when you face it kind of like head on personally, is a very complicated thing. Like it really like affects every aspect of your life. So I think that as you're thinking about ways that you can support people, just like try to be as intentional as you can, realizing that it's going to affect the way that they show up to work. It's going to affect the way that they, you know, show up in the world in general. And just keeping that in mind as you're handling certain situations, I think it's super helpful. There was this one time where I had a friend, she was one of my best friends at the time, who recently lost her mom. And there were times I was frustrated in the friendship because of like some of the emotional implications of like what grief was doing to her at the time. She wasn't pleasant to be around, if I was just being completely honest. But I had to kind of like put that aside, realizing this person has been through something traumatic. You're making this about you right now. If you love and care about this person, you need to be there for them regardless of what feelings are coming up. And, you know, there is a balance line. You have to make sure you take care of yourself and all that stuff. But also, when you are signing up for like supporting someone that is grieving, know that you are going to get anger. You are going to get like distance. You might get happiness. You might get tears. There's a lot of things you might get. So just prepare for yourself. Just prepare yourself. Don't make it personal, because at the end of the day, you're not doing this for you. You're doing this for them. And if you truly want to show up for them, then you kind of have to accept what feelings come with that. And that's just kind of like something I want people to know, because showing up for somebody that's grieving is kind of like really fucking hard.
Yes, that's so important that you said that, especially you who's been on both sides of it. And thanks for that reminder about like, it's going to be hard. It's going to suck. They are going to be feeling X, Y, or Z. And just to keep showing up and not making it about you, I think is a really great note to end on. End of summary. Show up. It's not about you. But sometimes it is. When it's your grief, it is about you. Okay. Talking in circles. Thank you, Chann. I really admire your outlook. You're super positive. I was inspired again at the event. I'm inspired now. I appreciate getting to learn more about you virtually. And where can people find you online if they'd like to connect and to buy the Option B book and find Option B online?
Yeah. So my Instagram is Chann Daily, CHANN Daily. On Instagram and TikTok. In terms of Option B, you can buy the Option B book in a lot of different places, kind of like pick your platform. Make sure you go to our website, optionb.org, and find us on Instagram at Option B, and you will find a lot of great resources to help you cope in whatever you're going through. We're going to grow through all of the shit that life throws at us together. So please join me and send me messages and all that stuff, because I love talking to people.